Antoninus Pius, also known as Antoninus, was Roman emperor from 138 to 161. He was one of the 5 good emperors in the Nerva-Antonine dynasty and the Aurelii. He acquired the name Pius after his accession to the throne, either because he compelled the Senate to deify his adoptive father Hadrian, or because he had saved senators sentenced to death by Hadrian in his later years. Early life, childhood and family. He was born as the only child of Titus Aurelius Fulvus, consul in 89, whose family came from Nemesis. He was born near Lanuvium and his mother was Arria Fadilla. Antoninus' father and paternal grandfather died when he was young and he was raised by Gnaeus Arrius Antoninus, his maternal grandfather, reputed by contemporaries to be a man of integrity and culture and a friend of Pliny the Younger. His mother married Publius Julius Lupus Suffect, consul in 98, and 2 daughters, Arria Lupula and Julia Fadilla, were born from that union. Marriage and children. Sometime between 110 and 115, he married Annia Galeria Faustina the Elder. They are believed to have enjoyed a happy marriage. Faustina was the daughter of consul Marcus Annius Verus and Rupilio Faustina. Faustina was a beautiful woman, well known for her wisdom. She spent her whole life caring for the poor and assisting the most disadvantaged Romans. Faustina bore Antoninus 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. They were Marcus Aurelius Fulvus Antoninus. His sepulchral inscription has been found at the Mausoleum of Hadrian in Rome. Marcus Galerius Aurelius Antoninus. His sepulchral inscription has been found at the Mausoleum of Hadrian in Rome. His name appears on a Greek imperial coin. Aurelia Fadilla. She married Lucius Lamius Silvanus, consul 145. She appeared to have no children with her husband and her sepulchral inscription has been found in Italy. Annia Galeria Faustina Minor or Faustina the Younger, a future Roman empress, married her maternal cousin, future Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius in 146. When Faustina died in 141, Antoninus was greatly distressed. In honor of her memory, he asked the Senate to deify her as a goddess, and authorized the construction of a temple to be built in the Roman Forum in her name, with priestesses serving in her temple. He had various coins with her portrait struck in her honor. These coins were scripted Diva Faustina, and were elaborately decorated. Finally, Antoninus created a new alimentor. Favor with Hadrian, having filled the offices of quaestor and praetor with more than usual success, he obtained the consulship in 120. He was next appointed by the Emperor Hadrian as one of the 4 proconsuls to administer Italia, then greatly increased his reputation by his conduct as proconsul of Asia, probably during 134 to 135. He acquired much favor with the Emperor Hadrian, who adopted him as his son and successor on the 25th of February 138. After the death of his first adopted son Lucius Aelius, on the condition that Antoninus would in turn adopt Marcus Annius Verus, the son of his wife's brother, and Lucius, son of Lucius Aelius, who afterwards became the emperors Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. By this scheme, Verus, who was already Hadrian's adoptive grandson through his natural father, remained Hadrian's adoptive son through his new father. The adoption of Marcus Aurelius was probably a suggestion of Antoninus himself, since the former was the nephew of the latter's wife and would be his favorite son. Emperor. On his accession, Antoninus' name became Imperator Caesar Titus Aelius Hadrianus Antoninus Augustus Pontifex Maximus. One of his first acts as emperor was to persuade the Senate to grant divine honors to Hadrian, which they had at first refused. His efforts to persuade the Senate to grant these honors is the most likely reason given for his title of Pius. 2 other reasons for this title are that he would support his aged father-in-law with his hand at Senate meetings, and that he had saved those men that Hadrian, during his period of ill health, had condemned to death. Immediately after Hadrian's death, Antoninus approached Marcus and requested that his marriage arrangements be amended. Marcus' betrothal to Caesonia Fabia would be annulled, and he would be betrothed to Faustina, Antoninus' daughter, instead. Faustina's betrothal to Caeonia's brother Lucius Commodus would also have to be annulled. Marcus consented to Antoninus' proposal. Antoninus built temples, theatres, and mausoleums, promoted the arts and sciences, and bestowed honors and financial rewards upon the teachers of rhetoric and philosophy. Antoninus made few initial changes when he became emperor, leaving intact as far as possible the arrangements instituted by Hadrian. A non-military reign. There are no records of any military-related acts in his time in which he participated. One modern scholar has written, "It is almost certain not only that at no time in his life did he ever see, let alone command, a Roman army, but that, throughout the 23 years of his reign, he never went within 500 miles of a legion." His reign was the most peaceful in the entire history of the Principate, notwithstanding the fact that there were several military disturbances throughout the empire in his time. Such disturbances happened in Mauritania, where a senator was named as governor of Mauritania Tingitana in place of the usual equestrian procurator, and cavalry reinforcements from Pannonia were brought in. Towns such as Sala and Tapasa being fortified. Similar disturbances took place in Iudia, and amongst the Brigantes in Britannia, none of them being considered serious. It was however in Britain that Antoninus decided to follow a new, more aggressive path, with the appointment of a new governor in 139. Quintus Lollius Urbicus, a native of Numidia and previously governor of Germania Inferior, under instructions from the emperor, Lollius undertook an invasion of southern Scotland, winning some significant victories, and constructing the Antonine Wall from the Firth of Forth to the Firth of Clyde. The wall, however, was soon gradually decommissioned during the mid-150s and eventually abandoned late during the reign. For reasons that are still not quite clear, Antoninus' Wall is mentioned in just one literary source, Antoninus' a biography in the Historia Augusta. Pausanias makes a brief and confused mention of a war in Britain. Although Antoninus' Wall was, in principle, much shorter and outwardly more defensible than Hadrian's Wall, the area included by it into the empire was barren, therefore straining supply lines and not worthy holding to on a cost-benefit analysis. It has been therefore speculated that the invasion of lowland Scotland and the building of the wall had to do mostly with internal politics, that is, offering Antoninus an opportunity to gain some modicum of necessary military prestige at the start of his reign. Actually, the campaign in Britannia was followed by an imperial salutation, that is, by Antoninus formally taking for the second time the title of imperator, in 142. The fact that around the same time coins were struck announcing a victory in Britain points to Antoninus' need to publicize his achievements. That this quest for some military achievement responded to an actual need, is proved by the fact that, although generally peaceful, Antoninus' reign was not free from attempts of usurpation. Historia Augusta mentions two, made by senators Cornelius Priscianus and Attilius Ruffius Titianus, both confirmed by the Faster Ostienses as well as by the erasing of Priscianus' name on an inscription in both cases. Antoninus was not in formal charge of the ensuing repression. Priscianus committed suicide and Titianus was found guilty by the Senate. With Antoninus abstaining from sequestering their family's properties, there were also some troubles in Dacia Inferior which required the granting of additional powers to the procurator governor and the dispatchment of additional soldiers to the province. Also during his reign the governor of Upper Germany, probably Quis Popilius Carispido, built new fortifications in the Agridicomates, advancing the Limes Germanicus 15 miles forward in his province and neighboring Rhaetia. Nevertheless, Antoninus was virtually unique among emperors in that he dealt with these crises without leaving Italy once during his reign, but instead dealt with provincial matters of war and peace through their governors or through imperial letters to the cities such as Ephesus. This style of government was highly praised by his contemporaries and by later generations. Economy and administration. Antoninus was regarded as a skilled administrator and as a builder. In spite of an extensive building directive, the free access of the people of Rome to drinking water was expanded with the construction of aqueducts, not only in Rome but throughout the empire, as well as bridges and roads. The emperor still managed to leave behind a sizable public treasure of around 2.5 million sestertii. The emperor also famously suspended the collection of taxes from cities affected by natural disasters, such as when fires struck Rome and Narbonne, and earthquakes affected Rhodes and the province of Asia. He offered hefty financial grants for rebuilding and recovery of various Greek cities after two serious earthquakes. The first, circa 140, which affected mostly Rhodes and other islands; the second, in 152, which hit Cyzicus, where the huge and newly built temple to Hadrian was destroyed. Ephesus and Smyrna. Antoninus' financial help earned him praise by Greek writers such as Aelius, Aristides and Pausanias. These cities received from Antoninus the usual honorific accolades, such as when he commended that all governors of Asia should enter the province, when taking office, by way of Ephesus. Antoninus was known as an avid observer of rites of religion and of formal celebrations, both Roman and foreign. He is known for having increasingly formalized the official cult offered to the Great Mother, which from his reign onwards included a bull sacrifice, a taurobolium, formerly only a private ritual, now being also performed for the sake of the emperor's welfare. Antoninus also offered patronage to the worship of Mithra, to whom he erected a temple in Ostia. In 148, he presided over the celebrations of the 900th anniversary of the founding of Rome. Legal reforms. Antoninus tried to portray himself as a magistrate of the res publica, no matter how extended and ill-defined his competences were. Therefore, the fact that he is credited with the splitting of the imperial treasure, the ficus, into the ficus itself or patrimonium, the properties of the crown, and the res privata, the private properties tied to the personal maintenance of the emperor, that the distinction played no part in subsequent political history, that the personal power of the princeps absorbed his role as office holder, proves that the autocratic logic of the imperial order had already subsumed the old republican institutions. Of the public transactions of this period there is only the scantiest of information, but, to judge by what is extant, those 22 years were not remarkably eventful in comparison to those before and after the reign. However, Antoninus did take a great interest in the revision and practice of the law throughout the empire. Although he was not an innovator, he would not follow the absolute letter of the law, rather he was driven by concerns over humanity and equality, and introduced into Roman law many important new principles based upon this notion. In this, the emperor was assisted by 5 chief lawyers. L. Fulvius Eburnius Valens, an author of legal treatises. L. Volusius Mechanus, chosen to conduct the legal studies of Marcus Aurelius, and author of a large work on Fide Commissar. L. Ulpius Marcellus, a prolific writer, and 2 others. His reign saw the appearance of the Institutes of Gaius, an elementary legal manual for beginners. Antoninus passed measures to facilitate the enfranchisement of slaves. Mostly, he favored the principle of favor libertatis, giving the putative freedman the benefit of the doubt when the claim to freedom was not clear-cut. Also, he punished the killing of a slave by her master without previous trial and determined that slaves could be forcibly sold to another master by a proconsul in cases of consistent mistreatment. In criminal law, Antoninus introduced the important principle that accused persons are not to be treated as guilty before trial. He also asserted the principle that the trial was to be held, and the punishment inflicted, in the place where the crime had been committed. He mitigated the use of torture in examining slaves by certain limitations. Thus he prohibited the application of torture to children under 14 years, though this rule had exceptions. However, it must be stressed that Antoninus extended, by means of a rescript, the use of torture as a means of obtaining evidence to pecuniary cases, when it had been applied up until then only in criminal cases. Also, already at the time torture of freemen of low status had become legal, as proved by the fact that Antoninus exempted town councillors expressly from it, as also freemen of high rank in general. One highlight during his reign occurred in 148. With the 900th anniversary of the foundation of Rome being celebrated by the hosting of magnificent games in Rome. It lasted a number of days, and a host of exotic animals were killed, including elephants, giraffes, tigers, rhinoceroses, crocodiles and hippopotami. While this increased Antoninus's popularity, the frugal emperor had to debase the Roman currency. He decreased the silver purity of the denarius from 89% to 83.5%, the actual silver weight dropping from 2.88 grams to 2.68 grams. Scholars place Antoninus Pius as the leading candidate for fulfilling the role as a friend of Rabbi Judah the Prince. According to the Talmud, Rabbi Judah was very wealthy and greatly revered in Rome. He had a close friendship with Antoninus, possibly Antoninus Pius, who would consult Rabbi Judah on various worldly and spiritual matters. Death in 156, Antoninus Pius turned 70. He found it difficult to keep himself upright without stays. He started nibbling on dry bread to give him the strength to stay awake through his morning receptions. As Antoninus aged, Marcus would take on more administrative duties. More still when he became the praetorian prefect. Gavius Maximus died in 156 or 157. In 160, Marcus and Lucius were designated joint consuls for the following year. Perhaps Antoninus was already ill. In any case, he died before the year was out. 2 days before his death, the biographer reports, Antoninus was at his ancestral estate at Lorium, in Etruria, about 12 miles from Rome. He ate Alpine cheese at dinner quite greedily. In the night he vomited. He had a fever the next day. The day after that, the 7th of March 161, he summoned the imperial council, and passed the state and his daughter to Marcus. The emperor gave the keynote to his life in the last word that he uttered when the tribune of the night watch came to ask the password, equanimitas. He then turned over, as if going to sleep, and died. His death closed out the longest reign since Augustus. Antoninus Pius' funeral ceremonies were, in the words of the biographer, elaborate. If his funeral followed the pattern of past funerals, his body would have been incinerated on a pyre at the Campus Martius, while his spirit would rise to the gods' home in the heavens. Marcus and Lucius nominated their father for deification. In contrast to their behavior during Antoninus' campaign to deify Hadrian, the Senate did not oppose the emperor's wishes. A flamen, or cultic priest, was appointed to minister the cult of the deified Antoninus, now Divus Antoninus. Antoninus Pius' remains were laid to rest in Hadrian's mausoleum. A column was dedicated to him on the Campus Martius, and the temple he had built in the Forum in 141 to his deified wife Faustina was rededicated to the deified Faustina and the deified Antoninus. It survives as the Church of San Lorenzo in Miranda.